something about your trip to Germany. So did you go there to get support, or?
Yes, we are building a global coalition for democracy in Zimbabwe, for the restoration of legitimacy and democracy. So in that regard, we are ratcheting up advocacy and pressure internationally. We have been focusing more on the region, SADC and AU. But beyond that, we also need support in Europe, in America, even in the Asiatics, to support the struggle for change in Zimbabwe. So our focus basically is to look at progressive forces to support the restoration of good governance, the resolution of the political crisis in the country. There is a political stalemate arising out of the crisis of governance because of the disputed 2018 election. So that is the message we're carrying to the world, and the clear message is that there has to be political dialogue to break the ice and locate a trajectory to development, to prosperity for our country, but also locate exit points to the traps that Zimbabweans find themselves. We are in a debt trap. Our debt is way above 18 billion. We're in a poverty trap. Our people are suffering across the whole country. In the rural areas, if you look at it, close to about 6.6 million people are food threatened. In the urban areas, about 2.2 million. That takes something like 8.8 million, almost half. Our country is basically in different traps. I mean, the poverty traps, 8.8 million people, starving of hunger, both in urban and rural areas. We have the disease trap. The humanitarian situation is totally out of this world. I mean, you have hospitals not functioning. For the first time, I have hospitals, main hospitals being closed down on account of doctors striking, doctors being persecuted, over 400 being expelled and dismissed on account of them having exercised their right to call for capacitation in their work. And this is a serious situation. So we have multiple challenges in the country. So we need to build that global solidarity, and that is why we are in Europe, and we will continue to engage all progressive forces across the globe.
What do you expect the European Union or the European country to do?
Well, the most important thing I've asked from them is obviously a threefold response. First is to look at the humanitarian crisis in the country. I've been calling on the European Union, the United States of America, China, and other countries, including the UK, to help Zimbabweans beyond politics. Democracy is meaningful on living bodies, on surviving bodies. Dead bodies need no democracy. The symmetry is not beneficial to democracy. So we need to look at our people and say, beyond the politics, Zimbabweans need to be assisted. And obviously, in giving that humanitarian support and assistance, medically and also in terms of food interventions, to deal with nutritional issues, things like disasters like cyclone Idai, if we were to have another, because it's a real possibility, or other outbreaks of diseases, we need to look at interventions that are not partisan. We've also made the point internationally that food is being used as a political weapon. Food is being weaponized in the countryside. You can't get food if you are not supporting ZANU-PF. So we need structures that go beyond partisan enclaves or balkanized approaches, so that people are given food, not on account of the party they belong to, but on account of their needs. So it's a need-based intervention as opposed to something that is partisan. And of course, that issue has also been understood because it's also violating our constitution. Our constitution does not allow food to be used as a political weapon. There's basic right to food as a fundamental human right that has to be understood in that context. So the first one is the humanitarian support. The second one is obviously the resolution of the political stalemate. We need political dialogue to resolve the governance crisis, to resolve the legitimacy crisis. Nothing short of the resolution of the politics of our country is going to resolve the problems in our country. We have said is politics stupid. We have said that fix politics in order for you to fix economics. Good politics attracts good business and good economics. So yes, we need to resolve the legitimacy crisis, the disputed election of 2018, because if we don't resolve it, we are going to be entrapped in this vicious cycle of contested elections, contested plebiscites, and that is not health for the country.
But you have precondition, right?
We have, I'll address that, but I just want to tell you the three issues we are focusing on. The third issue is obviously the issue of reconstruction of our country. We're already thinking about, stabilizing our country, reconstructing our country, almost like a Marshall Plan, because the country is in a difficult situation, almost like in a post-war and post-conflict. Because we're in a conflict, we're in a war. The regime is at war with its own citizens, so that situation requires some kind of a rescue package, an emergency rescue program, and that's why we're already mobilizing for interventions economically, interventions in terms of infrastructure support, public-private partnerships in the event that we've resolved our politics. Because the morning after is the most important. We can resolve our politics, but then we have to feed people the morning after. The expectation is going to be huge, but we need to begin to obviously lay the framework for those interventions going forward. So those are the three critical asks we have to the international community.
So to go into the dialogue, what's the name? I lost the name. The public. Pollard. You have precondition, right?
Well, look, Pollard is a market show. It's a diversionary platform. Pollard is a big joke. And as you can see, we are not people who are in the business of joking. We mean serious business for our country. We do not want to waste people's time by creating a crisis of expectation on something that we know is going to be a hot air or something that will not produce the desired result. What is required is structural reform, root and branch reform. What is required is genuine dialogue, inclusive dialogue, credible dialogue, scaffolded and underwritten by the international community. That dialogue cannot be done until there is involvement of the key political players. We went to an election, disputed as it may be, but people indicated preferences. And the MDC was the majority party, the leading party. Whereas ZANU claims to be the ruling party, the MDC is the leading party. We control 28 out of 32 major cities and towns. And on that account, there has to be dialogue on the source of our crisis. ZANU-PF argued that the crisis is bad omen and bad luck. We say the problem in this country is bad governance. The problem in this country is disputed elections, rigged elections, a disputed mandate. And because we have a legitimacy crisis, it then gives birth to a performance legitimacy crisis. Because force cannot replace legitimacy. And that is what we have to address. Citizens have no confidence. They don't trust the regime. And because the regime is not trusted, they cannot build a national consensus on any direction.
So what do you want? You want an international mediator, or what do you want exactly?
There has to be a credible mediator, international preferably, but even local. But there has to be mutual understanding that this mediator is not going to be bullied.
And who could be the local one, for instance?
Sorry?
Who could be the local?
Well, the churches have been trying. That could be a platform, but there has to be mutual trust. Because we've seen that the tendencies of our colleagues in ZANU is to bully local players. So we need international stature, clout, so that the credible mediation is not clawed back, is not reversed by way of certain tactics that are then imposed. Once bitten, twice shy. We've seen the deficits of our past global political agreement in 2009, and we've learned certain lessons. We can't just go into power sharing without vision sharing. We can't go into power sharing without value sharing. We can't go into power sharing without understanding that what has to be shared first is the journey, the trajectory to save our country and to feed the people and to give them jobs, to give them dignity, and to restore Zimbabwe among the family of nations.
But the problem is, even after the government of national unity, I mean, the elections were rigged. Isn't it the problem that...
That is, in fact, the elephant in the living room is rigged elections.
Yeah.
But rigged elections is because of capture of institutions of the state, particularly the military, particularly the judiciary, particularly the so-called independent electoral bodies, especially the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, because they've not been able to exercise their mandates independent of the state. And they don't understand that they are public institutions, not state institutions. That then becomes a problem, and that is what we must be able to address. We need our soldiers to continue to do their role as defenders of the throne, not as kingmakers, to be able to have our soldiers doing what they have to do by demilitarizing the villages. And demilitarizing the villages entails devillagizing our military, getting our military back into the barracks.
Demilitarizing the villages, can you explain, because I don't get it?
Most of our soldiers are active in the local villages. They need to be back, in the barracks.
What do they do in the village?
Well, they are doing all sorts of programs, command agriculture, quasi-civilian issues, but obviously with other mandates that we are not sure of. And we need to make sure that our military are doing what they are supposed to do in terms of the Constitution to defend the sovereignty of our nation, and not to support one political party, and not to be a defender of one party against the other. They are not supposed to even be umpires, because that's not their remit, that's not their forte. All they're supposed to do is to play a pivotal role in making sure that there's security, there's stability in the country, beyond the political parties playing their different political roles.
Why, during the MDC, as a GNU government, the MDC didn't manage to control those institutions which helped to rig the election?
Well, the issue for us in the inclusive government was never to control, but to deliver change. So as we're focusing on delivering change to people's lives in education, health, in ICTs, infrastructure, reconstruction and rehabilitation, most of the benefits and fruits you are beginning to see even now of the things that we did then. ZANU were busy entrenching themselves to manipulate the people. And that was basically the problem. It was a clash of civilization, a clash of focus, a clash of vision. And that's why for now, we've said that we need to make sure that we remove our military from state institutions, from public institutions, so that we are able to have independent electoral bodies doing independent roles that they're supposed to do according to the Constitution. But mind you, there was also a problem with Mr. Mugabe and ZANU-PF then refusing to listen to SADC. As you remember, we went to Maputo. Maputo, SADC had requested that there be postponement so that we address all the issues to create a conducive environment for elections. But Mr. Mugabe, through some other legal means, that application that was made in the court, just roughshod their will upon the people and imposed an election which was not held in a conducive way. It then produced the kind of illegitimacy we saw. It reproduced the same illegitimacy when we had the interventions of 2017 in November. We thought that the election in 2018 July were going to cure the illegitimacy, but it actually fomented that illegitimacy. So as we speak, our country is suffering from circumstances of an election that is disputed, but also a leadership that is not credible.
How do you rate Emerson and Mnangagwa and the kind of regime here in Zimbabwe? How would you qualify the regime, actual regime?
It's rateless. You can't even rate it. It doesn't qualify to be rated. You rate someone who has done something. If you have done nothing, how do you get rated? In our education system, we have something called ungraded.
But if He dismissed some ministers who were corrupt. He tried now increase, I think, the budget for education and health, which is for the first time higher than the one for the defense.
The so-called dismissals, in fact, it's not about ministers who must be dismissed. He must dismiss himself because he's the archbishop of everything. When you do a corruption check in this country, you always locate the center of it, being the man at the top. And those are the things we must be able to investigate.
Can you explain to a foreign audience who doesn't know the man how he's part of the corruption, or how the government is...
If you have cartels in gold, cartels in corn, cartels in fuel, all these cartels in energy, cartels in banks, doing forex, exchange, shady dealing, not being dealt with, what do you expect?
So he himself is in all those involved?
What is clear is that if you do nothing about it, then you must be responsible for all the wrong that takes place. And the buck stops with him. And that's why I said, look, as far as we are concerned, we are back to 1961. The MDC is being treated as a banned political party. We are back to 1961, where we had the Smith regime and the Rhodesian regime, when the nationalist movements were not being allowed to hold meetings. Demonstrations were literally banned. Police dogs were set on the citizens if they would demonstrate. People would not be allowed to express themselves. That's where we are. And clearly, if we look at it, we are back to the Rhodesian days.
The police or whoever in the government said that the last time when in November there was an issue and the police, target was very violent, that you were supposed to, and you couldn't address it, you were supposed, you had a permission to address people somewhere on the outskirts of Harare, but you didn't respect.
Oh, but we don't need permission to hold. The fact that you are talking about permission, why should I be permitted?
But isn't it a law that for any public or political march or gathering you need to get the permission?
So
the same in South Africa.
If a draconian law is imposed, you know that during Botha's days in apartheid regime, that's when you used to have the so-called kind of permission that you are talking about.
But it's still the case in South Africa today.
Yeah, you notify.
Yeah, you notify.
Exactly. You don't need permission. You can't ask for permission to exercise your constitutional right. It can't be good law. If you are to ask permission to breathe, that does not make it good law. Certain laws cannot be obeyed because they are not normal, they are not human, they are not natural.
Do you think the situation is worse today than 3 years ago?
That's why I told you that we are back to the Smith days. We are not even in the Mugabe era. Mugabe looks like a saint now. I'm sure for many people Mugabe is Saint Robert Mugabe. He looks like an angel for many people. What they are now seeing is the West. And I can tell you that this is a sentiment across the whole country.
And don't you think the crisis, economic crisis, monetary crisis, is a bit a man-made crisis which benefits the elite, some of the elite close to...
There is no economic crisis in Zimbabwe. There is a governance crisis. There is a leadership crisis. There is a political crisis, a legitimacy crisis. That's the crisis we have. All you are seeing are the symptoms. You can't address symptoms and cure symptoms and hope that you have cured the disease.
No, but the problem is all the interest, vested interest, the black market, the corruption.
Those are manifestations.
Yeah.
Those are just, that's the evidence of the problem. Let's address the core of the problem. You are describing the problem. I'm telling you that the prescription to dealing with the problem is to deal with the governance deficit, period.
Do you think the European Union should maintain the sanction, increase them?
Look, I'm not an advisor of the European Union. I can only talk about Zimbabweans. The situation in Zimbabwe is untenable, and we are asking for the European Union to do everything within their power, capacity, and competencies to help Zimbabweans address the deficits of governance. When it comes to issues of measures, targeted measures, that remains an issue that's bilateral between the authorities in Zimbabwe and the European Union.
Yeah, but it's good to have your view. Did you see the report of the special report from United Nations?
Indeed.
Yeah, he said he recommended to scrap the sanctions.
Well, what sanctions are we talking about?
This is again the travel ban and
this is again a way of trying to shoot on straws. The real issue in this country is nothing of that sort. The governance issues are more important. How citizens are treated, how citizens are honored and dignified is the key issue. The fact that I'm a Zimbabwean and I'm not able to express myself is a big issue. So you can't tell me about how Europeans should react to a person who is not even able to live with their own brother or their own sister. So I won't be drawn into a ZANU-PF language of the so-called sanctions.
Yeah, but because you said Zimbabwe need international help and a Marshall Plan, but it's not going to happen.
Yes, it will not happen because we've not corrected our own political situation at home.
All right.
Let's get our act right. If we get our act right, we tick all the boxes governance-wise, tick all the boxes reforms-wise, tick all the boxes in terms of holding free and fair elections, tick all the boxes in terms of making sure that there's accountability, responsibility for our own deficits, omissions and commissions in our country. Then we can then talk about approaching the international community and have dialogue.
Look,
But
for
you,
now,
but you-
just
you-
international.
but you can't go to the international community with a banana republic tag.
For now, just food aid. That's it.
Look,
Now people are.
Look, we need food, we need support, but that support has to be predicated on a country that is able to also show that it is reforming.
But even food aid.
We must be able to show the world that we deserve to be helped.
But yeah, but the crisis is now. It's now that people need food aid, and I mean, the
So are
government
you-
is not going to change
So are you
overnight.
suggesting to me that people must continue to butcher citizens?
I don't
and
know.
then-
I just ask you the question. I'm not.
Precisely. So
Yeah.
the point I'm taking and making is that we have to deal with our own domestic issues. Yes, people need food, but also people need dignity. Yes, people need to be fed, but also people need to have an enjoyment of their rights.
Yeah, but the question is, I understand they need both, but the question is now, with the situation, current political differentiation, would you advocate to increase food aid or not?
We need food. That's what my first point. I told you that we need intervention in three aspects. The issue of the humanitarian crisis, the issue of the political stalemate, the issue of the economic reconstruction. But one feeds into the other. You must have good governance. Seek ye first good governance. Everything else will follow. I have a problem with people who then want to say, let us just have food aid. You can't just be asking for money into a bottomless pit. It will not help Zimbabweans. It will be eroded by corruption. It will be eroded by a greedy political elite. It will be diverted for political ends, for political power, machinations and manipulations. So we need to have both sides of the equation well, and we can't say either or. It has to be both, if not all.
Okay. So one thing is MDC is very well implemented in town, but not so much outside in the countryside.
That's a myth. It's a fallacy. A fallacy that is perpetuated on account of rigged elections. When you distort an outcome, you can't use that outcome as an indicator of support and support. But to the extent that we've managed to hold 14 areas where we're able to minimize rigging in the urban areas, yes, you would say that our solid support in the urban areas is unquestionable. But beyond the uncontestable support we have in the urban areas, it's a fallacy that MDC is not supported in the rural areas. It's all rigged, a mindset. It's all rigged, a narrative. The real narrative on the ground is that MDC is supported holistically. There can't be a geographical divide between urban and rural when it comes to political support. It doesn't make sense. The people you find in urban areas are the same people you find in the rural areas through their various networks and family relations. So why would you say that people in the rural areas are suddenly foolish when it comes to political choice. People in the urban areas are a lot wiser. There's no such demarcation. It's all a figment of the imagination of dictators and politicians who are propagating a false narrative.
It's more the implementation of the party on the ground that I was talking than what people vote for which party they vote. It's more like the organization on the ground.
The parties everywhere. MDC is the only party with a national footprint. A footprint that is not imposed, a footprint that is not supported by the state. We are everywhere. So the MDC, you go in every corner of the country, there's a national footprint of the MDC. In fact, we are stronger in the rural areas than it is in the urban areas. That's why ZANU-PF people would beat up people in the rural areas. Where on earth would we have people who beat up people who support them? If they're supporting the rural areas, why do they mount infrastructure of violence? Why do they send people into the countryside to beat up people or to coerce them into voting for that? Why do they use food as a political weapon to victimize people? If MDC is not in the rural areas, why are people being victimized in the rural areas on account of food?
How do you explain that there is no mass demonstration in Zimbabwe?
There is mass demonstration. The fact that you have not seen it does not mean that it's not.
Yeah, there was one in January.
Yes, but you must look at the repressive tools that are there. Nowhere in the world would you have a military that is deployed against an unarmed civilian. Nowhere. Give me examples. Even in Iraq, in Syria, where it is fully fledged a war situation, a war zone.
In Egypt,
Even in Egypt, you would find that you will never have the army shooting at unarmed civilians. The army would be on the streets, yes, working with the people, supporting the people. That has happened elsewhere. But not the army being against the citizens. It has never happened. It only happens in banana republics like Zimbabwe, where you find people being gunned down when they are not fighting, when they are not doing anything. So that militates against the ability of people to organize. And what you also find that we're a democratic movement operating in a dictatorial and militarized environment. We are using democratic means, yet democratic means are not available. We are using democratic tools like demonstration, yet they are not available. That platform is not available. So we are beginning also to revise our tools. Because look, we are being treated like a banned organization, like an underground movement, when in fact we are a democratic movement. That tells you that we need to revisit fundamentally our strategies and tactics.
So, apart from international pressure or whatever, what else how can you revise your strategy?
Political pressure internally. Making sure that this struggle belongs to the people. Making sure that there is no rural-urban divide. Making sure that people in the rural areas and urban areas unite. Making sure that there is no partisan divide. It's no longer a ZANU-PF issue, neither is it an MDC issue. This is a national issue. It's a survival issue. It's about our country, it's about our nation. It's about our survival. And we can only do that together. And this is why we've said now, it goes beyond parties, it goes beyond power. It is now about our collective existence and our collective subsistence as a people, our dignity as a people, our rights as a people, our survival as a people. And that, for us, is the most important issue. Go beyond parties, go beyond, and it's no longer about the churches or political parties, civics or politicians. It's now about everyone.
So you want to create a mass movement? Or?
It is now a situation that calls for a mass, broad-based, inclusive, broad coalition of democratic forces to free Zimbabwe.
And do you have talk with different organizations? Is it what's happening on that?
We're in a state of permanent conversation with progressive forces, nationally and internationally.
So can we expect next year to have
I don't want to promise you anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not further promise. So I don't want to promise anything. Zimbabweans will obviously find their way of expressing themselves. It's not a Chamisa issue. It's not an individual issue. It's a people's issue. and people will express themselves.
Okay. Thank you. Just one maybe last question. The fact that so many Zimbabweans go to South Africa or other countries doesn't weaken in a way the opposition because so many.
Well, I mean, we have made the point to President Ramaphosa, to the ANC in South Africa, and to all the key players in South Africa, including citizens of South Africa. But we've also made the point to Botswana, Zambia, to Mozambique, to Malawi, that the Zimbabwean problem is a SADC problem. The Zimbabwean issue is an African issue. A sick Zimbabwe will contaminate the entire of the continent. You know, when Zimbabwe catches a cold, the entire region sneezes. The entire continent sneezes. Why? Because an injury to one is an injury to all. And we've said no longer should we continue to treat Zimbabwe as a foreign policy issue within SADC. It is a domestic issue for South Africa. It is a domestic issue for Botswana. It is a domestic issue for Mozambique. The challenges in Zimbabwe are the challenges in South Africa. Because we do not need Zimbabweans to be going to South Africa. We can create opportunities here.
Are you disappointed by the lack of action of South Africa?
I'm not disappointed. I'm challenged. Because there has to be more. And we must do more to cause our brothers and sisters in the region, in SADC, to see the value, the profit, and the validity of the position we are putting out. The platform we have said has to be sorted out. It's a governance issue. We must address fundamental issues of governance. But you know, we are extremely concerned with the developments in the region, where ZANU-PF is now crossing borders to export dictatorship, to export rigging of elections. I mean, look at the DRC, look at Malawi, look at Mozambique, look at Botswana, look at Zambia. We are beginning to have a new phenomenon of disputed election. And it would appear that, bad drops are being borrowed in other countries in the region. And we're not setting a good example. And that has to be nipped in the bud.
Yeah, and the MDC didn't get much support from the region. Huh?
Yes, but the issue is not the support of the MDC. The issue is that it has to be the support of the people of Zimbabwe. It is not a partisan enterprise. It is a collective yearning. It is a collective dream, a search for answers. That's why you have Zimbabwe in the diaspora, in the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. That is the crisis, the manifestation of a crisis that must be resolved. That we have many people in exile is not a manifestation of an MDC problem, but a national Zimbabwean problem. And it's not a ZANU-PF MDC issue. It goes beyond. But it takes two to tango. So we need the key players to come together, address the issues. I mean, you look at young people who have not had opportunity to be gainfully employed or to enter into gainful entrepreneurship. It tells you that we have a whole lost generation.
You know, we were meeting the head of the rural teacher, Aubrey.
Yeah.
And he was, Obit.
Yeah.
And he was telling, what we need is more action on the ground, because a lot of people now are not in the formal sector. It's difficult to mobilize them. They are busy with their survival.
That's right.
And that if there were more action on the ground, even to provide service or to create jobs, it would be easier to mobilize people. But that takes a lot of money and a lot of, it's easy to say, but to do it...
Well, which is the point I've been making
because
to a lot of people internationally. That there is a lot of pressure on the MDC of leading the struggle, but without capacitating the instruments of democratization, the players, the raw players and the key stakeholders. For MDC to stand, it has always been Zimbabweans self-funding, but yet there's no money. I mean, you can't self-fund when you have nothing. This is why the international community, this is why the region, African continent, all our friends must be able to help us. Right now we are living on difficult circumstances. To mobilize people, to mobilize you need resources, to mobilize you need capacity, to mobilize you need institutions, and that requires a lot of money. So I agree with the labor union leaders, particularly the teachers union leadership, that we need that kind of support. But that's why I say international solidarity is important in material terms, moral terms, but also in political terms, and even humanitarian wise. So that support must continue to come from the international community. None of the MDC people is without a scar. If it is not a psychological scar, it is a physical scar. If it is not injury to your family, it is injury to self. Many have treason charges. In fact, under Mnangagwa, 21 of our people are facing treason charges. Yet under Mugabe, only had about 5 or so during his entire reign. You know, arrests. We have over 1,000 people who have been arrested on one or another of the charges, trumped up charges. And that tells you that we're in a difficult situation. Now that doesn't happen to people who are not organized.
So the 21...
We've had abductions, over 53 abductions in this country, mostly MDC.
Since when?
Just this year.
Because the human rights organization says 6 abductions.
6. Only 6 are the prominent ones. But 51. In Mlawayo, I can't even count. These are the prominent ones. And I can actually go beyond 6 just for the prominent ones. That doctor, you know, the journalist, comedian, our own people in the party, members of parliament. I mean, 60. I don't know which script they're reading. 52 we recorded.
And those charged with treason, are they mostly MDC?
Mostly MDC, in the senior leadership of the party. Just open your mouth, it's treason. Just open your mind, treason. Open your eyes, treason. Say something about Mnangagwa, treason. Even something good, treason. You'll have to defend yourself in court. It tells you how vicious and dictatorial the system is. Now, you can't fault the MDC, because the MDC is just a vehicle of this democratization struggle, of this transformation struggle. We've done a lot, and we're still doing more. But it's a difficult situation because of the circumstances.
Yeah, there's no space.
When you have no space, we are not a military organization. We are a democratic organization. We're not an underground movement. We participate in the elections. So, that's why I said our tools and tactics may have to change, considering our circumstances. We're dealing with a vicious regime.
I remember when I interviewed 15 years back, you were saying, the court case is not enough. The party must be more radical and more...
We are more radical. In fact, you must know that we have theaters of the struggle. We've identified close about 7 sides of the struggle.
7, sorry, I didn't...
Sides of the struggle, zones of the struggle, or fronts of the struggle. The courts are just but one of them. We have to go to the courts because we still have to maintain a modicum of legality. Bar the fact that we have challenges with that route. It's a blocked route, but we still continue to use that as a route to test the Constitution, but also test the rights that are in the Constitution and expose why that is not a viable route. The second issue is Parliament. It's a theater of struggle because we are in Parliament to democratize the country, but also to advance the democratic cause. The third one is local authorities, where we are very much present in huge numbers. But again, it's a frontier of the struggle. The fourth one is the street. We've been active in the street for a long time, and we continue to be. It has its own consequences because you can only do so in a limited context. Mind you, we are not like Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, or ISIS. We are movement for democratic change. Our name that says it all. Unless if we change, then, but again, that's a radical shift. That's not the party that we form. So the street continues to be a very important tail of the struggle, and we'll continue to dominate the street, and we'll continue to mobilize the people. You know, the media is also a contested space in the theater of the struggle. Mm-hmm. But you know that our media in this country is almost like, you know, arrested. For me to have a voice, I must have value all the way from out of the country. People in South Africa, in Belgium, in Germany, in Denmark are more informed about what's happening in Harare at any given point in time per second than, you know, and that tells you a lot. There's no information. People in Belgium would not face what's happening in Harare because of the closed space, and of course relying on the social media, which is also again closed because of the charges of internet, the charges of the social media. So yes, the media is another one. The other one is the international diplomacy and international support and solidarity. It's contested. ZANU would always want to invoke the liberation solidarity, which is blind solidarity, because ZANU is ceased to be a liberation vehicle. It's no longer a vehicle for liberation. So it can't continue to be in the family of the organizations and institutions that fight for liberation or democratization in Zimbabwe or even in the region. So that space again is contested space. More fundamentally is also the resource struggle, which ties into the elections. You know, resources equals results. You can't win elections without resources. But we've performed miracles as MDC. We've done it. Without resources, with our open hands, we've managed to win the support of the people, defeating Mnangagwa. We had support from other foreign powers, we had support from shady business people. They had millions of money, vehicles that are imported without paying duty for their party, yet we were using our own bond-made vehicles, our 2 legs, walking on foot, door to door. Ordinary women doing extraordinary things. That's the story of the MDC. Least celebrated, but a serious story that will be told one day.
Good. Just an anecdote.